And then Dad goes in to fucking fuck up Frank, and we get to see what, Tom?
A good old psychedelic murder.
That's right. And it's amazing.
Yeah. I think it might be, if it's not the only, it's the first American psychedelic murder scene.
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.
All right. It's 1 fucking hour time, everybody. Hey, Joe. It is the show where we talk about one goddamn movie, and we have just 1 fucking hour to do it. I'm Evan Husney, and to my left, we got Big T, Tom Fitzgerald. T, what's going on, man?
Howdy, folks. This is a classic shortlister, so it's good to address this movie tonight.
Yes, one we've been waiting for forever. Probably since the beginning of the show, we've talked about this movie. And
Absolutely.
Wanting to cover it. But of course, also we have over here to my right, we got Mr. Marcus Herring. Marcus, what's going on, man?
Hey, Joe. Joe.
Yo, Joe. All right.
Your life is calling.
Yeah, exactly.
Are we doing Joevember? I mean...
Oh, this is motherfucking Joevember.
Right.
All right.
That's right. If you didn't know already. So every day we've been doing a Joe film in November. Every day. And yesterday we did JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling.
Oh, it was so
that
great.
was wild.
That was wild. We did JoJo Rabbit, I Made You All Do, which was not so fun.
A great episode.
Killer Joe, trying to think what other Joe films are out there. But this is
Crazy Joe.
Crazy Joe. This is the quintessential Joe, though, because it's Joe. Okay, this is where it all began. Here for Joevember. Very excited. Everyone is excited for this.
This is one of those rare times. This is a one film series. This is it. The Joevember series is being addressed tonight.
Yes, it is.
And then no more.
No Joe after this.
Yeah.
Episode 120. What the fuck are we talking about? We're talking about John G. Avildsen's 1970 film, Joe, starring Peter Boyle. Very excited to get into that tonight. Very disturbing and also funny and underrated gem that somehow time is forgotten. I don't know. It's weird. I don't know why this isn't like part of the Bonnie and Clyde Easy Rider sort of New Hollywood.
The New Hollywood canon.
Yeah, it's weird. So anyway, we'll get into that. But before we get into the episode tonight, everybody, I just thought we'd give a shout out to the 1 fucking hour Patreon. Patreon.com/1 fucking hour is the best way to support us if you want to support the show. If you like what we're doing here, you like listening to us talk about movies, and you want to hear us talk more about movies, you can head over to patreon.com/1 fucking hour. It's just $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of our bonus eps, audio commentaries, and you get 24-hour early access to all the eps before everybody else does. Pretty good deal. That's worth it alone, I think. And what else? If you want all your bonus content to live on YouTube, though, and you don't want to fuck with the Patreon, you can go to our homepage on YouTube, find the join button, click that, become a moment of the channel, and it's just also $5 a month. And you can same benefits, same perks, same price. We appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Keeps the lights on here. It's the motherfucking Patreon, man. So appreciate it.
Hey, baby.
Yeah. Become a moment. All right. You guys ready to get into Joevember here? Are we all ready for this?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good?
One and done it. Yeah.
Okay. Here comes the clock. Everybody get ready. 3, 2, 1. All right. I'm going to begin this just with a little plot synopsis, since this movie is, I guess, not on the tip of everyone's tongue. All right. This is a little bit lengthier description, but I pulled it from a fella named Chris Wagner on RogerEbert.com.
Nice.
And I think it does a pretty good job of summing up everything here. So the eponymous anti-hero, Joe, a factory worker played by Peter Boyle, befriends a businessman played by Dennis Patrick, in a dive bar. This businessman has lost his temper and bludgeoned to death his daughter's boyfriend, a sneering heroin addict who hooked said daughter, Susan Sarandon, in her first film role. Joe is a Scarborough's caricature of blue-collar resentment, a casual and vociferous racist who finds the accidental homicide committed by his new friend pretty neat. He is Nixon's silent majority mutated to grotesque form. Joe could be described as a hard hat exploitation movie, Tom.
Like that.
A lurid, violent, and darkly funny snapshot of two social classes finding common ground over hatred of those damn hippies. The film dramatized the bond forged between two groups, aggrieved blue-collar workers and fat cat businessmen that were rapidly becoming the backbone of the Republican Party at the time. It offers an interrogation of issues and emotions that divided America as the 60s became the 70s. Joe reflects the country's rightward slant of the times, but it's also intrigued by causes and effects of this slant. It holds a cracked mirror up to a turbulent period and reveals a swirling prism of a country teetering on the edge. So, sounds a little cuspy to me.
Cusp! No, sure. It's on the vanguard. Well, I think it's both a little early in the 70s, and the rollout of the new Hollywood 70s.
Yeah.
After Easy Rider's success, it's early somewhat because it's still, shot in 69. But also it's extreme.
True.
I think I was reading recently that because again, all this, we're so used to all this, everything that's happened since films like Joe.
Right.
But I think this had unprecedented profanity.
Yeah.
It's weird to think that, but
True.
And all these bad words and racist words and stuff. And I think it was just like its own kind of shock right there to have such really dark, frank language yelled, in your little movie theater, your popcorn palace.
Yeah, it was so shocking, in fact, and so unprecedented that it made its way onto vinyl release. That's right. You could, what is it called, Marcus? Talking Joe? What's it called?
Joe Speaks!
Joe Speaks.
Exclamation point.
Yeah, Joe Speaks. A vinyl release of Joe's racist rant that's like 5 minutes long in the early act of the film there. And that also speaks to the fact that this was a hit. This movie, it's kind of wild, but it was a surprise hit. It made a lot of money. It generated a lot of controversy, as Tom, you said, and it was nominated for the best original screenplay for the Oscars of that year.
And again, you got to remember, this is a micro-budget film. It was like, $100,000 or something like that. And Peter Boyle wasn't famous before this, and so really it had no stars in it. And it had no hope, is what I'm saying. No one would have bet on this. It would have just kind of been this small, little weird thing that came and went.
Yeah.
But it caught fire. And, that's the thing. I think it's always interesting to find these films where, no one had faith in it. It didn't have like a big production, a distribution rollout and hype. It just sort of like caught on, word of mouth and so on. Actually, Billy Jack is like that too from that time.
For sure. Totally.
And I think it's I think as much as anything for me, that's what I like about the quote unquote new Hollywood is that a lot of films bombed and no one remembers them. There's a film called Sidelong Glances of the Pigeon Kicker. You don't know that, do you?
No.
That's a new
Just
Hollywood
making up
movie.
titles.
Wow.
Exactly. No, but that's completely forgotten. Sidelong Glances of a Pigeon Kicker exists. Anyway.
Amazing.
But what I'm saying is like, like a lot of them didn't resonate with people, but then like this, and then Billy Jack did, and and I think what you're saying is sometimes a film doesn't even mean to, but it meets an audience that is waiting for Joe to exist.
Well, that's what's weird about it, because this movie, I think, and we'll get into this with its tone and what happens in the film and the way that, Avildsen basically approached this material is easily someone could have made more of a protest movie, if you will, or a film that appealed more to the left or even to the right, but this movie somehow embraces it could appeal to both sides, in this massive cultural divide that was going on in the country.
It could have been another film like The Strawberry Statement.
Sure.
RPM.
Yeah.
This was these were all big bombs, and one by one they just kept coming up and getting knocked down. And they had a lot more, they were studio backed actually.
Yeah.
And even Zabriskie Point was a big bomb. You know.
Right, and so you had all these movies that are like, the generation gap or the counter,
but made for the youth.
Yeah, right, exactly. You had all these films coming out.
Point of view.
Yeah,
right.
like coming out at this time, but this movie sort of walks the line in terms of making both sides look really bad ultimately, which is very interesting, which we'll definitely get into. But it was also this kind of phenomenon where I remember after seeing this film here in New York, 15 plus years ago, there was a repertory screening of it. And I remember someone in the Q&A, I can't remember who was speaking about it. Someone was speaking about it, and they were mentioning how this film could play like Uptown, where, that crowd could watch the film. And basically as soon as, the end rolls around where the hippies are getting slaughtered and they're like, yeah, woo, and they're like cheering on the end of the film.
Oh, that's what you mean by Uptown.
Yeah. And then, right. And then
you mean like Astoria, Queens.
Yeah, sure. And then like downtown, the film is obviously playing to the village and everyone's, obviously outraged by what they're seeing.
They're mortified. Well, the thing is, I think Pauline Kael pointed this out once. For that time, there was a lot of like martyrdom going on, and like sort of like with the first bummer ending of Easy Rider, where they're killed and they're sacrificed, on the cross of this the hypocrisy of this corrupt society, and they're like the good guys. And actually, guess what? El Topo ends the same way, with this martyrdom, blood sacrifice to the bad townspeople, and the thing is, this film pulls the rug out from under you in a weird way, because yes, that does happen, but the heroes, there's no heroes in Joe. And that's, I think, that makes a real distinction, because everybody is a complete dirtbag, including, of course, the quote-unquote hippies, as exemplified by my favorite actor of all time, who's the Patrick McDermott. Patrick McDermott portrays Susan Sarandon's boyfriend, dirtbag, drug dealer. Not even drug dealer. He would sell like aspirin to 14-year-old kids. And say like, this will knock your socks off your ass, guys. Like just a total creep. And he happened to have long hair, so he's a hippie, but he's really just a shithead.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the first big hippie that we see in the film. Yeah. And it's not a good portrait of hippies. And I think that's early. Joe's early in having a dirtbag rendering of the hippie right in the beginning. And he's repulsive, and she seems kind of stupid and dinged up, and the relationship's based on like drug use, and their apartment is squalor.
The sort of New York hippies always look, there's always a big distinction between them and what's going on the West Coast. It's like, it's almost more just like drugs and living in apartments and stuff. It's like, it's the opposite. They both have long hair, and they wear like French clothes, or whatever, fringy outfits. But aside from that, it doesn't really ever feel that connected to me. Like, at least how, I wasn't there at the time, but just how New York hippies are depicted in this show or in this movie, or in Mad Men too, is like very similar when they disappear in the same area, often to St. Mark's, and it is this sort of like dirtbag, drugged out, long hairs. Not even hippie, really, just like long hairs.
Really, San Francisco led the way for this. Like, okay, so this is the Summer of Love, Haight-Ashbury, right? And if you just read anybody's personal eyewitness account, like Robert Crumb's account, it was beautiful for a summer in '67, but then very quickly,
it got dark.
It was dominated by hard drugs and hard drug dealers, and rip-offs and 14-year-old girls kind of prostituting. It got really bad in those apartment-iness worlds of San Francisco. So it was far from idyllic. Maybe in LA, if you're rich, it was cool.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? Like in Laurel Canyon,
Right. And obviously, New York's, got a lot of heroin going on, and when that mixes, shit turns pretty grim. But something else about this movie too that's so unique, especially for the time, is the oscillating tone of the film is so unique. I mean, normally, I think when you evaluate a film and the tone's all over the place, that can be a negative. But this film manages to thread that needle brilliantly. I mean, it goes from, it constantly shifts. You know, the film opens kind of disturbing and dark, but then as soon as Joe comes in, it's getting funny, witty, satirical, and then it becomes this very weird buddy comedy that we'll get into,
and kind of like a black comedy portrait of American classes, clashes. That reminds us of Taking Off, the film from the next year in '71. We're going to have to do that.
We have
the
to.
Milos Forman film. Like and there's some tonal shifts in that one too. Yeah, but there's harsher ones in this one.
Yeah, and then it ends in a violent revenge exploitation film sort of way.
No, totally.
So it's just got everything. It's the power of the film to be disturbing, you know, with murder and things like that, and then to be so kind of really funny, you know, at times.
No, I know.
Wild.
So I want to point something out about, like, again, I think a lot of the show today is we're going to talk about the Zeitgeist, of which it was both born and thrived, this film, Joe. That the ads for in 2 years later, there's an ad that mentions Joe. It's for the movie Last House on the Left.
Oh yeah,
which is still the harshest film ever, kind of. Really, like we screened it at Cinefamily, and there's all this campy, gory stuff. We did like video nasties, and that one still is just like
unfun.
It ends and it's like, I'm gonna go home.
Yeah.
So
we
really,
we did an episode on that for the show, right?
We haven't done Last House.
No, we haven't.
No.
So the thing is Joe is mentioned in the ads, weirdly enough. Just to give you an indication of things, the ad in Last House on the Left is across the street from Joe.
Yeah.
You know, and what does that tell you? Like they both like if like there's winking to the viewer, the potential viewer, like, you like the hard, ugly, dirt, sick stuff with sick, grotesque hippies and getting murdered hippies. And everyone,
the fact that that's shorthand on the poster shows that they expected people to get the reference immediately. It just shows how big this film was, you know?
It's amazing.
No, but I also mean what they're telegraphing to the potential audience. Like, you like gross, dirt, ugly, harsh
hippie murder.
Hippies are like terrible hippies or horribly murdered. You know, like, Jesus Christ. So anyway, that shows you where Joe
it's
is
like
in some level.
It's like a sick wink, you know, to the audience on what you might be in store for with this movie. But we also should say, too, just cultural context wise, this film is also it is timeless, and I think, and there's a lot, you know, you could draw parallels to today, of course, but it is a snapshot, a perfect snapshot of like that exact month in time. It feels like, you know, because you had this mood of the country that was completely on edge, very divided. As the late 60s was coming to a close and the 70s was there, and sort of the counterculture movement that was happening on the right. And it really reflects that, and it reflects the sentiment of, oh my God, things were going so out of control with what was happening in the late 60s. We gotta tamper this, and of course Nixon winning and then winning again, and it's like, it's all about like what I feel like was going on in the country, and also the collapse of not the collapse, but the working class, the sort of traditional Democratic Party of the working class people are now swinging the other way, more towards the conservative values, and how we're all kind of against this progressive hippie thing that's going on.
Well, I think a few things were happening. I mean, you know, it's easy to be like, oh, why have such a knee-jerk reaction to these hippies who just want peace and love? But really, everything was hardening, like there's the Manson murders, but there was that group, the Weathermen Underground.
Oh, yeah.
They had a big party.
Yeah.
Right before Joe came out, they had a big party called It's going to be Year of the Fork, 1970. Okay?
Yeah.
And they're referring to the fork that was stabbed in the stomach of one of the victims of the Manson family.
Yeah.
And that just shows you, like, things were hardening really fast. And I think that, just to go full circle, if you don't mind, I was just getting into like the My Lai massacre of 1968, and look that up. That was really bad,
really harsh.
Like that was. I mean, there's the Vietnam War, and then there's the My Lai massacre,
right? And
there were more My Lai massacres. I'm sure it was just the famous thing that got exposed.
Yeah.
But that's so bad that I think that some people who are 20 years old would go, wait a minute, you want me to go to that war, be involved in My Lai massacres? Well, maybe no, but also you guys are the bad guys, and I'm going to turn my bayonet towards you.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of justification for Manson family like murders. People think Manson family is like, oh, they're all on drugs and Satanism, but it's more, as much as anything. I mean, it was based on just how harsh the Vietnam War was in theory. Like over there, bad things are happening. That's happening like now, like in the Middle East. But like, no, you might have to go. You're going to get drafted and be in that for young men.
Yeah.
So none of us are from that age. We have no idea how that must have felt. And I think they thought like, I'm not going to say peace and love because these guys have got a gun in our face and want to put a gun in our hand.
Yeah.
And they're fascistic, murdering racists, and I'll end with this one. A lot of Black Power people said, the Viet Cong never called me N-word.
Right.
And that's a heavy statement.
Right.
That is an undeniable heavy statement. So that's why the atmosphere, that's why the kettle was really at boiling point when Joe came out. And I'm not saying anyone's justified here necessarily.
No, it's just what's happening.
A lot of super harsh stuff happening in all directions. Also, kids were getting younger, 14-year-old kids were screwing and taking a lot of weird, dangerous drugs.
Running away, dropping out.
Yeah, exactly. There's a panel in a Mad magazine that scared me when I was a kid. And it says it's just went famous last words. And one of the panels was these hippies in a medicine cabinet. And they go, I don't know, let's go for it.
Yeah.
People are they were injecting cleaning fluid and stuff. And
Sure.
It was harsh because it was out of control. And yes, there's Woodstock, but then of course Altamont, so
right.
Anyway, this film could not be, film is maybe the best portrait of the harsh Bad Moon Rising of the time.
Yep.
I love how many clashes it represents, it captures,
True.
You've got your generation class, between the hippies and then the older generation. You got your culture clash that's mixed in there. You had the class clash between the upper middle class and the working class. Then you've got the gender clash that's going on between Melissa and the hippie guy, and then the wives. And there's so many everyone has sort of an antagonistic relationship in relation to each other.
Yeah. True. It's not just Joe,
No.
And I do want to make clear, I was joking about it, but the lead hippie, the one who's murdered in the beginning of the film, he's an awful human being.
Yeah.
He doesn't deserve to die.
No.
No, not at all. But he's not good.
No,
he's just as much of a piece of shit as Joe is, I guess,
Yeah.
And he's sexist and he's a rip-off artist.
He's smug.
I think the first time I watched this movie, I didn't catch his name. I don't know if I still don't know his name. Frank. Okay, so I remember thinking that this was Joe, the first, because Joe doesn't actually come in until 30 minutes into the movie, So,
but and he's also a shitty artist too. He's like a painter,
right. I paint.
Yeah, right. But it's interesting, as you said, right off the bat, you're introduced to both of Frank and Melissa, Susan Sarandon, in his, shitty village apartment, and they're taking a bath together. Nudity also right off the bat, kind of shocking, with Susan Sarandon right off the top. And then
both of them.
Yeah, both of them, right, of course. And then there's also the class divide between them, because he starts prodding her about, her rich father.
She's a rich kid.
She's a rich girl, and that whole thing.
That's one thing that's interesting about John G. Avildsen's work. Class comes up a lot, in Rocky. That's a class story.
He directed that. We didn't mention that. He's the director of Rocky.
Is there class in Karate Kid? Because
that was my next point. That's what I was just going to say next, was that the Karate Kid, Daniel LaRusso, is this lower class, working class kid from New Jersey.
Yeah.
And all the rich kids in California that he moves out to that are harassing him. And even Neighbors is kind of the other Avildsen movie. Neighbors is also a clash. It is a class clash.
Class clash, yeah.
Gotcha.
And I got to say, I think I saw this. I think I saw Joe at Cinefamily. You guys had John G. Avildsen out, and it was a double bill. It was Joe first, and then Rocky after, and then it was my first time ever seeing Rocky on the big screen, and just being this movie objectively fucking rocks, and the soundtrack and everything. It's amazing. So. Very talented filmmaker.
It was great when he was there. I went to go see. I was just a member of the public then, and I went to go see him for Neighbors, and it was great to have him there and kind of,
it's great.
And it's just such a brilliant movie. He's got
right?
he's got Belushi and Aykroyd playing opposite, or playing against type, which was great.
Yeah, yeah. Very weird film. Anyway, getting back to the movie. So, as we're introduced to, Tom, your favorite character, Frank, and Susan Sarandon, there's it's hard not to notice just some subtle set design here, production design, where they have the Raggedy Ann doll that's kind of positioned behind her.
Oh, dude. I am looking at a still of it right now. It's filthy. It looks like it's been It looks like it's been on the floor for like the past 5 acid trips, and it literally has like step marks all over its face. And I've got this still of her like embracing it and everything like that. One thing I was going to say about that apartment, you know, I was really kind of like getting autistic about like the details of that horrible apartment, and you just know that they just scouted like, can we give you $100 for the week?
Yeah, totally.
Like they didn't dress that set at all.
Yeah.
That's somebody's fucking abode.
And it's got the French Connection hallways and everything, and you know,
and the last house it's a very last house on the left house.
it is, yeah, it is.
Like the apartment that they get, the girls get stuck in when the creeps,
totally,
they're trying to buy drugs. It's basically across the, it's the movie across the hall.
It is, right? But that Raggedy Ann doll is kind of, a perfect sort of symbol of innocence too, because it looks like her. It looks like Susan Sarandon, but it's also, kind of gives the audience that idea of like, something she loved as a girl. It was a doll of hers has been,
she has big
corrupted.
Doll eyes.
Yeah, right. She does, and now it's corrupted. It's stepped on, physically, and it's a perfect little visual metaphor.
It's beautiful.
There.
I was going to say, let's not sleep on the great filmmaking, that happens, because there's the themes. But he also has a great eye.
He does.
He does express. He's very cinematic. He expresses things, just like you're saying. The shot of the Raggedy Ann being embraced.
Totally.
That's saying so much.
It is.
Yeah. Got to mention that he actually shot this movie too. Right?
That's right.
Like he's the cinematographer for the movie, which is
dope. Yeah, it's
legit.
Great. Super legit. So then, of course, she goes out. She comes back, or at some point he comes back. Excuse me, and starts shooting up, and then he gets high. It freaks me out, man. And he shoots up, and that scene, to talk about just a tonal thing, texturally like feels like an Andy Warhol's Trash or something.
Ooh, nice. You know what I was going to say?
What?
Trash, but it also reminded me of it would be a great anti-drug film for high school.
Totally. Well, what that
sometimes.
Is?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? When it really feels like that is the next scene, or a couple scenes later, when she's having her amazing overdose in the drugstore, which I think that sign is still there. I think that's on 2nd Avenue or First Avenue.
Ooh, I hope so.
That the outside of the drugstore, I almost think it's still there.
Yeah, she's like in an old Rexall or something.
Yeah,
it's putting makeup all over her face. Like
I love the cashier, like, "Oh, honey, what are you doing?" Like this sort of soft approach.
No, it does look like a Alice is Lost in Wonderland, 16 millimeter, like educational short film.
Totally. Totally. And she's smearing the makeup on the mirror and her face, on her face, and you see it in the mirror, and it's just
great filmmaking.
So great. It's so awesome.
Very exciting filmmaking.
It is. Totally.
It's engaging.
It's very engaging. And then, of course, she overdoses, but she survives. And then her parents are there to oversee her after this. And that's when we meet the parents and we realize they are, this sort of upper crust, rich, dad's an madman, and, has the wife and everything. And, and then, of course, the film takes its dark turn, second dark turn, I guess. Darker turn, yeah. When Dad goes to find back to her apartment, finds Frank, the boyfriend, who's just looking for trouble with everything that he's saying. He's calling her out that Melissa has a hang up about her dad and her parents, man, and and then Dad goes in to fuck up Frank, and we get to see what, Tom? A
good old psychedelic murder.
That's right. And it's amazing.
I think it might be, if it's not the only, it's the first American psychedelic murder scene. Maybe there's like Giallos, maybe, and stuff. You know what I'm saying? But that is literally, and what I'm saying is, as much as anything, there's echoing sound of him in pain, and then also this great effect of trails, echo trails of the movement of his head being smashed against the filthy wall.
It's amazing.
Fuck, dude.
It's amazing. It looks like, it does kind of look like something out of like The Trip or something, you know,
Yeah.
and it's got the ghost trail visual echoing and the audio echoing, and it's
Right.
like
Really well done though too. You
It
know,
is.
It's not doesn't feel cheap or like
No.
you know, some of those other films might.
Yeah.
yeah. So that's just like another just weird stylistic
The
choice.
showstopper. Yeah.
Showstopper. Yeah, it's awesome. It's incredible. So that's amazing. I'm sure I will have cut to it more than once by this point if you're watching on YouTube. And then we get to, okay, so he kills the boyfriend. He kills Frank. The dad kills Frank. Big damn deal. And of course, you know, we kind of, you know, the film allows us to sit with him in the emotions of what he's done, the release, you know, and all of that, the panic of everything that's happening after that. And of course, he wanders into, I think it's like American Bar and Grill or something. It's like perfectly named.
What neighborhood do you think that is? Like 14th Street area? Or
Could
like,
be.
Whatever. Union Square.
Could be. Yeah.
When it said
Or
grill, I was trying to imagine the kind of food that they serve in there.
Or like Murray Hill, actually. Kind of.
It
Anyway.
could be. It could be. Yeah. Like, I'm trying to think like where.
Could be on 8.
Yeah,
Who
it's
knows?
weird.
Okay.
It is weird. Yeah. Anyway, so he wanders in there, and that's when we're introduced to Peter Boyle, who obviously is just a standout performer in this film. You know, and he goes on, as we mentioned earlier, this insane racist rant. You know, 42% of liberals are queer, you know, type of stuff that he's saying.
Well, it's the classic belly aching. It's not just racism. It's like
True.
Like I'm getting shit on by everybody.
Yeah.
And really what he's saying, you know, a lot of, I mean, I'm not trying to help him understand, but what I'm saying is that like his main gripe is about him being powerless and about how like he doesn't get any advantages
in the
and
system.
The rich white people are helping because of white guilt, helping black people and giving them all this free stuff. You know, it's a very free stuff kind of stupid rant.
Yeah.
It's happening now with immigrants a lot.
Yeah.
And so so it's a lot of resentment.
Yeah.
That maybe is a kernel of truth in some vague way in the socioeconomic, you know, like the rigged system. But of course, he's going off on this tangent. It's base and it's hateful, resentful. It's not constructive and it's distorted.
Right.
And of course, it boiled down so much into simple us versus them.
But then his performance of it, you know, is delivered by, you know, a Queens guy who's like this, and he's just talking to the bartender. So there's some humor in the delivery of it, you know, because it's almost like this satire of
he's a character,
a caricature of a bridge and tunnel guy from that, you know, point in time. And you probably would still see someone like that, honestly. Of course. But
like Staten Island plumbing and supplies, you know.
Totally. And but what's, you know, interesting about, you know, Peter Boyle, just to kind of shout out him, you know, he was basically a huge discovery for you know, John Avildsen and everyone involved in the film. They actually, when they discovered him and they found him for this role, they rewrote the movie around him, essentially because of his ability. You know, because he is a comedic actor. You know, that's what he is, and they also
Young Frankenstein.
Right, exactly. But he's also somebody who can be funny, but then he can turn on the menace, you know, when he needs to. And so like he's playing this over the top, you know, vulgar sort of performance, and so it's like as soon as they found him, they just completely rejigged the movie around him.
We were talking about this recently. Like once in a while, we talk about a movie where a star is born.
Yeah,
like you did not know who this was,
Yeah.
and then you're going to know who it is because there's a simple power.
Yeah,
you know, they just eat up the screen, and they're compelling. And he is in this film, and he's Peter Boyle, and he's proved it many times over.
One thing, I guess the producers didn't want him, or they sort of rejected him because they thought he was too young. And then you look at it, and I was thinking that too watching. I was like, oh, he looks like, how old is he? He's like only 35 or something like that, you know?
Wild.
But they were expecting more of like someone in their like early 60s, late 50s or something that would have fought
like his
in the
bowling
war.
buddies.
Yeah, exactly. But he was just so good.
Yeah,
that
he
they were
was.
like,
And he
fuck it,
works.
just put him in.
He totally works. One other thing too, just while we're here talking about just a little of the backstory, you know, this film, from my understanding, was supposed to be a much simpler story, more so about the class divide between the rich father and the, you know, West Village hippie daughter, you know, Susan Sarandon, and it was going to look more at that. But in, I believe, the start of the year, somewhere around there, there was that huge, hard hat construction worker, and businessmen who attacked all the protesters in New York who were marching, against Kent State and the massacre in Vietnam War, as you mentioned earlier. And when they saw that happening in their own eyes in front of them, Wexler, the writer, and John G. Avildsen were like, okay, we gotta retool this and make this more about exactly what's happening right
It's
now.
like torn from the headlines, basically.
Right. He said Avildsen said they were really influenced by Spiro Agnew and like all his like rants about the silent majority that was happening at the time.
Yeah.
That guy Norman Wexler is pretty interesting. Like, it's a big famous screenwriter. Did he get the Academy Award for this? He got nominated for this.
Nominated only.
Yeah.
Right. But he wrote Saturday Night Fever. He wrote Serpico. He wrote Mandingo.
Wow.
He was like a script doctor, that like had a really good mastery of like street dialogue and everyday kind of real man dialogue. And a really interesting bit of trivia about his career was that his assistant was Bob Zamuda, who was Charlie Kaufman's like
crazy
writing partner for his entire career, right? And Bob Zamuda, he goes in, he performs as Tony Clifton. I think he still does, right?
I know he might still. Yeah.
We saw him once at Cinefamily. He came to Cinefamily once as that. I think we mentioned that before, but yeah, so he was there as Tony Clifton when we were there. But Bob wrote a book, and he is kind of a bullshit artist, Bob Zamuda. He's like says that Charlie Kaufman's faked his death. He's still alive and stuff. You can't tell.
Andy Kaufman.
Oh, that's right, Andy Kaufman. Sorry, too many Kaufmans. But so you never. It's hard to discern like what's true, like in his like tall tales, But he does have a lot of interesting stories about Norman Wexler, and he says that Wexler was actually sort of like partly inspired Tony Clifton's act because he was such a nutso kind of character. And Bob would say stories about how like he was a really wealthy, like well-paid screenwriter who would walk around New York barefoot in the snow and looked all disheveled. And Bob's job was basically they would go out in the morning and Norman would just go get into arguments with people on the street. And Bob Zamuda's job was to record the arguments on a tape recorder and then have them transcribed. And then, that's where all of his sort of real, everyday, like kind of blue collar dialogue came from.
Amazing.
There are all kinds of weird stories about this guy, like, going to mafia parties and causing all kinds of trouble, almost getting killed by the mob. Anyway, it seems like a very wild character.
And to put a button on all this, he'd gotten some trouble in 1972.
He was sort of bipolar, so he had some problems with that. But he got put in jail because he made a threat against President Nixon.
Oh yeah,
and so he got arrested for that. But his excuse was like, no, I didn't threaten the president. I didn't threaten to kill the president. I was just suggesting of different ways that we could solve the problems that we're in now. And one of those ways was to kill the president. That's all. So.
Works for me. Okay, so now we go home.
Well,
Joe and the rich guy encounter each other.
Oh, sorry. I just want to point out one key line of dialogue in that when they meet each other, which is awesome. Of course, Joe goes over to the jukebox to put on a song. He talks about how everyone's fucked up the music. These kids have fucked up the music.
What's this iron butterfly?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And then he basically is like, I'd like to kill a hippie. I'd really like to kill one of these hippies. And then it's a great dramatic line. Cuts over to Bill, and he's like, "I just did," Which
that actor Dennis Patrick is a little under appreciated, but he's quite good in his role. I don't know who the hell he is.
He is.
He's got kind of a Ted Knight vibes to me.
Sure.
Kind of, yeah, no, but that's an important performance too.
It is.
He does a great job, and it's very indelible face, and like that, what you're saying right now, when he makes that confession, he blurts it out. It's
great,
as you're saying.
Yeah, it's great. He's like, and then obviously Joe picks up on the fact that he's telling the truth. Then we cut to a day in the life of Joe as he goes to work and he's in the factory job, and then he walks home, and that's when we hear the movie's theme song, which is hey, Joe, why do we have to go to war
once more?
Hey, once Joe. More.
It's like it's sort of country, but not. And then and Joe is eating TV dinners and opening cans of Schlitz over and over again, and Ritz crackers
and ketchup.
And he has the ditzy wife, gets a lot of comedic mileage, and she kind of reminds me of a Taking Off kind of character. And, but again, it's not broad. It's not like a grotesque, silly rendering. But it is, it's inherently kind of comic.
It was comic though, right? You're laughing at them, right?
At her. More
Maybe.
so.
I mean, but what I'm saying is that she's a type. She's her own kind of character. And she's like talking about the stories, her soaps today.
I know, as if what happened today.
Yeah.
Like
Joanne,
what happened today? Yeah.
Joanne decided to keep the baby.
Right. So then again, great writing. This is good script writing in terms of
totally.
So
the dialogue.
No, the dialogue, but also the scenario, because now what you have is you have these two characters, Bill and Joe, that have met each other, but there's this dramatic tension because Bill thinks that Joe is going to maybe blackmail him, because he figured it out that that Bill really did kill this hippie, and then of course but then again Joe is sort of in awe of Bill because he's kind of done. He's done what he only wishes he could do.
Yeah, he's a very successful man.
Yeah, well, and that he
Joe's
killed
just
a hippie.
been sitting at a bar, like ranting all this stuff to nobody. Like no one was even listening to him at the bar. And then here's this guy that actually put those, all of his, violent desires into action in the real world.
That's right.
Yeah, and then they kind of develop this friendship where there's kind of a curiosity and mutual respect across the class divide. You have, Joe is in awe of the money that Bill makes, and then Bill's sort of in awe of Joe's, I guess, authenticity to be himself, and he's a real
his freedom.
His freedom,
like,
yeah.
I like what you're going there with that because that is implied that he lives in a very bullshit, stuffy, uptight, fake world. He's talking about, there's Bill Smithers when they meet one of his colleagues at a bar, and he's like, I'm going to lie to Bill straight up and down, and he's going to buy it, and and so
I think
it's just very Mad Men actually.
Definitely.
It's sort of it's really in a way it's like Mad Men meets like Archie Bunker meets the Manson family.
We didn't mention that this film is very proto All in the Family. I mean, it sort of forecasts the Archie Bunker, or Joe does, that sort of archetype. Archie Bunker loved his family, and there's some sort of redeeming qualities there in that character. Joe's kind of without all of that. But
right. It would be as if Archie shot Meathead in the stomach or something in episode 7. Remember that scene?
Right.
Sure.
Blew him through the door.
Right.
Well, Archie just winds up being sort of cuddly and lovable, but he's just sort of he's doing his best.
He's doing his best. And then, but what's... Sorry, go ahead, Marcus.
Oh, just the Mad Men thing. I mean, Norman Wexler did work in advertising, and that's where Bob Zamunda and him met.
Wow.
And yes, this guy, what's his name, Compton, he seems like he works at the same office that Roger Sterling does.
Totally.
But that's what I was trying to say before. It's like, I liked your point having there, Evan, which is like, there is something, it's not just a relationship of convenience for the rich guy. It's partly to like keep on the good side of Joe, right?
Yeah.
But it's also like he is idealizing him in his own way of being more frank and more street level. Yeah. And by calling calling out bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it, because he's trying to sell, he's kind of selling Joe to his wife. Like, this could be good, or whatever. He's kind of like doing the hard sell on his wife about why they should spend so much time with him. And I think part of it too is that, he's got, before he meets Joe, he's like got this frozen stare about, oh my God, I killed somebody, But then when he's around Joe, Joe's like, dude, you killed somebody. That's so awesome. So he doesn't feel as much guilt or shame when he's
there's that too.
What's that line though that he says later in the film? There's that line that he says. Bill says, "The strange thing about Joe is that he shares in what I did, the killing of that boy." And then Bill says, "It's funny how you can learn to live with anything, even murder."
There you go. To me, this is an interesting point too that leads towards the end of the film. Leads us to the end of the film. The tone is that Joe actually also helps the rich guy rationalize the murder because Joe's like, look at it this way. he was hooking like countless 14-year-old kids on hard drugs.
Right.
So this guy was a threat.
Yeah.
And you just annihilated this person who was going to destroy the lives of all these children. Yeah. And so he went, and so you see on the face of the rich guy, he's like, oh, maybe I did do like something like quite the opposite of like a murder, but like a service,
a
to
social
humanity,
service,
which does inform both of them as we go towards the end of the film.
That sounds like Taxi Driver too.
I was just about to say that. And here's the thing. Here's the thing about that is, Peter Boyle's in both films, right? He's in both movies.
That's right.
And
the Wizard and
the Wizard, the Wizard. Love that. The Wizard. Shout out. We did Taxi Driver in the archives too. If you want to hear that, we've covered it. But what was I going to say? Oh, the one of the things that chilled Peter Boyle to the bone was the response, as I was mentioning, that this movie got when he would be around people who were more like, anti, counterculture and anti-hippie and stuff. I think he overheard somebody saying like, Joe is a movie about, he overheard someone explaining it to somebody else as, it's a movie about a guy like me who's sick and tired of all this crap. And it's like, damn, like
whoops,
because it doesn't really, the movie, even in it's it's right up until its final moments, it doesn't really kind of take a side or,
it's not heavy-handed.
It's not heavy-handed. It's very subtle.
But one sad thing about Peter Boyle, it's true, is to understand that he made this monster character that became monstrously popular.
Yeah.
Now, Peter Boyle at the time, though, was hanging out with Donald Sutherland and Jane Fonda. He was in Steelyard Blues and like part of the FTA, Fuck the Army, sort of like road show of an anti-ROTC, for Vietnam veterans entertainment show. So he was a big peacenik and a big lefty guy.
Oh, yeah.
Peter Boyle. So it must have been very strange and conflicting. And he said that he was chilled to hear the cheering at the end.
Yeah.
They're mowing down the hippies.
Yeah, that's really
disturbing.
here.
And he said, like, I can't make another violent film again. And he actually did turn down Popeye Doyle, the lead character of French Connection. He said, I can't do these violent films anymore because he was offered the role that Hackman got.
Wow. That would have been...
And I could see him in...
Me too. Totally.
Right?
Yeah. So the thing that brings Joe and Bill together is this, even though they're on opposite sides of the class, this mutual hatred, for what's going on in the country, really, which is scary, And but then we get to this amazing scene, a lot of comedic value here, where the two families are breaking bread at Joe's house.
Oh, it's great.
Where you have
comedy of manners.
Comedy of manners. Yes. Eating the Chinese takeout.
It's the best in Astoria.
Yeah, the best in Astoria.
Or whatever.
Hope you don't mind the can.
Yeah, and it's great when she's like, taught, like Joe's wife is like, oh, here, give me the Chinese food box because he likes it better when they're all lined up on the table. It looks better that way.
The banality of all of it. And and the rich chick is like with the nuts, she's like, oh, I don't mind the can of nuts. It keeps them fresh.
Yeah, right.
And she's kind of side-eyeing like her husband.
She's doing her best. Oh, they're both rolling their eyes.
I know. Couple,
it's
funny. So
it's a great scene.
Right.
It's very taking off. God.
It is. Anyway. We got to do that. We will. So then there's a very disturbing scene in that little set piece where Joe shows Bill his, creepy gun collection. And
his man cave.
His man cave.
That is 100%
That's a proto man. That's like the old early man cave. No, he goes down. Can we just maybe spell this out a little bit? Because I got real fascinated by this when I watched it again last night. It's like just his basement has like deer heads and just gun after gun after gun, big American flag. And he just sits there and holds his gun.
Watching
and listens
TV.
to the Joe song and watches TV.
The Joe song.
Yeah, it's playing in a loop in his head.
Yeah.
The man cave. Joe's man cave is kind of what's up.
Very scary. And so he's showing him the guns, and then he calls Bill's wife down to explain to her, you don't have anything to worry about, as he's holding an automatic rifle.
Hey, Toots, everything's cool.
Yeah,
he's holding like a live round automatic rifle.
A legal weapon. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Pretty crazy. Great
film.
Yeah, it is. It's an awesome film. So then we get into my favorite section of the film. Well, what preempts it, we should say, is the idea of, once Bill and his wife return back to their pad, they're sort of talking about like, how weird Joe is and how, he knows, is he going to hold us against us at some point, this information? If he ever gets mad at us, it's going to go south. And then all of a sudden we see that Susan Sarandon is home and she's overheard ostensibly a confession that her father has killed her boyfriend.
Which feels like a fable to me. I was saying this before to you guys before we taped, but like that feels like a fable. Like, and then the daughter overheard the conspiring. It's like Shakespearean almost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is.
classic storytelling. That's all I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
He was a playwright. Wexler was a playwright before too, which I think like
There you
fits
go.
that and some of the
Sure.
structure stuff that's going
Yeah,
on.
that's what I
too.
mean. Yeah,
Sure. It's very taut. And so she runs off, when she hears this and vanishes, into the night, into the village or wherever.
So now, what we're trying to say is now lots of people know
Yeah.
that the rich guy killed Frank, the grotesque hippie. It's like the word's really getting out.
Yeah,
you know?
totally. And so then, there's a scene where then, Bill's back at his office in his Mad Men, Roger Sterling office, and he gets a call from Joe. Great little filmmaking. We get the macro close on Bill's mouth as he's on the phone with Joe, and Joe's pushing him. You gotta search for her. You gotta go out there. We gotta go out there tonight and look for her in the village. And so then they pack up, and we get to my favorite section of the film, which is the buddy misadventure, sociopath misadventure sequence of the film.
Bill and Ted's macrobiotic misadventures. Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
No, it's
Bill and
no, it's incredible. It's like you really. This must have had people really doubling over in laughter because
yeah.
it basically is like the old rich guy and the truck driver are sitting like in a lotus position talking about alfalfa sprouts. That's inherent comedy.
This could have been like a fucking Elliot Gould comedy, or
Good point. You could have spun this and had no murders.
No
and
murders.
It could have just been a comedy of like fish out of water kind of thing.
Totally.
And that is an element of the film. But yeah, the macrobiotic place, which was real, the cauldron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is all like, rugs and tapestries, and you do sit down on the floor, and we don't serve any alcohol.
Yeah.
And they just have, we have tempura.
Miso soup and,
which is a very now, that place feels very.
I was just going to
right
say,
now.
it does feel now. There's a place exactly like that in Asheville still, where like you got to take your shoes off, and the same waiter.
Oh, there's a
even,
place 8 yards away from me here in LA. Yeah.
8 yards from all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, really.
And so it's amazing. They're going to the restaurant. Then they meet these hippie kids who are looking for some drugs, but of course we find out Bill has all of Frank's drugs in the trunk of his car.
That's great. Again, another
Great plot
effortlessly
device.
executed plot device.
Plot device.
Thank you. Like it's done with grace, which is not easy, but like they do it where it's like, that's what I mean about it's sort of a fable. Like, well, I just happen to have what all of you creeps want in my, I'll be right back.
Can I get
which
really,
moves the plot forward is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and then to get really like the minutia of Bill's performance in that moment when he's confronting the hippie, he gives him this look like it's perfectly delivered where Bill is this fish out of water there, but you can tell he's performing it with such fear of these hippies. Like he's almost scared of them and their weird drug world. And he's like, I have all the drugs that I need, and he's doing it in a way where he's trying to like overcompensate.
Psych them out a little bit.
Psych them out, That's really good little nuance there in the
and they
performance.
kind of respond to it like, well, it's that kind of thing where it's like they're more afraid of you than you are of them kind of thing.
Totally.
Because the hippies are like, what are these guys? Are they narcs? Like, what's their deal? Because it's so alien. Like both otherwise have maybe never ever spoken to each other for more.
Well, they
than
were
a
going to prey on them first. Remember, he was like going to rip them off, right? Like he was like, "Watch me go rip these guys off."
Yeah, right.
Whatever.
He thinks he's going to sell them oregano or whatever.
I just mean it's planets are colliding.
Planets are, but that's a thing too, where it's like I think there's a line of dialogue between Joe and Bill early on where he's like, I bet you never thought you'd be talking to someone like me, but and there is this kind of like worlds that aren't meant to be communicating. That are
it's triangulated. It's 3 planets are smashing into each other.
Yeah,
it's not common in film. It's usually binary.
It's true.
Duality.
True.
Right. Most people wouldn't be able to handle that much dynamic going on.
Exactly.
Great. It's great. So then that gets us to another all-timer scene here where it is the party at the chick's pad, the drug party. And they're all there, man. And I got to tell you, man, a scene that brings a big old smile to my face is when they're panning across the sort of drug den or whatever you want to call it at the chick's house. And it's Bill and Joe sitting very close together on the floor, like sipping like children out of a
I know
out
what
of
you
a
mean.
out of a
Well,
bottle.
see, there is this
It's almost
thing,
homoerotic in a weird way. Go ahead.
Okay, but there is something about how they're not sitting. They're out of their comfort zone, like in the simple fact they're not sitting at chairs,
Right.
at tables, like they're sitting on the floor.
Yeah.
And both the Macrobiotic restaurant and the Crash Pad, and it's not unlike Roger in Mad Men when he does his LSD trips. Not that he was out of place, like he rolled with it.
But it is like that.
But
yeah.
is that similar? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And no, but my favorite thing, and I'm looking at a still of it right now I took yesterday, is them sucking hard on a hookah and looking at each other like, oh, it's a good draw.
Yeah.
Ooh. And it's just like, what am I looking at?
Yeah.
Because that's what I mean. Like, sometimes there's movies that are really fun where you see a character take a broad journey. And actually, Flirting with Disaster, surprise,
sure,
has that. Towards the end of the film, everybody's on drugs, and the cop that was arresting people is like naked and saying like, "I've turned into a flower." Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
I do. Yes.
End of
yes.
Flirting with Disaster.
Yeah, great film.
Anyway,
yeah, and it's it's so funny. And then he takes the big old drag from the hookah. Peter Boyle does. And he's like, I gotta, maybe I should sit down because I don't know what's gonna happen, And it's amazing.
I don't feel nothing.
I don't feel nothing. Yeah, and then of course they get involved with an orgy. That's
right. Everybody, it's time to get naked. Let's also clarify that the consistency of the film is the male hippies we're seeing in this world are shitheads. They're totally predatory, and they're like, how are we gonna get over on these guys? Look at all these drugs they got. Oh, they got coke, they got speed, they got acid. It's like, all right, and they do make a plan, which
I know
the destructive conclusion.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm going to say, the women, the hippie women in this film are treated, I don't know, more empathetically, but like they are given a little more humanity than just looking like gross predators. All the men are gross predators, and the women are just sort of, I think, to be kind, I think they're mostly just sort of confused, and they're looking for maybe a good time, and they're thinking maybe this is the way to do it. Everyone's like 20 years old.
Yeah, they're children. Yeah.
Forget that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of like, and it's also mildly funny that, Joe or Bill has no idea like the amount of drugs that he is in possession of is like so drugs. Crazy. Yeah. Right. And so then
I love all.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I love all just the way it's photographed too. This sequence with all the gels, like the sort of magenta and the red.
There's a TV on with static.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's a cool little punctuation and all the gel light stuff.
Totally great. And then of course, Bill hooks up with a chick. Joe hooks up with two chicks, right? Which is crazy.
Yeah, the first one says like, "I think you just you just hit the
the fastest
land speed record here, buddy."
Right.
As he rolls his corpulent body over from this beautiful nubile woman. Yeah, no, it's again, I swear to God, it's like just like objectively, like, wait a minute. It's like you went and you you had to leave the theater and you came back. It's like, wait, why is Joe now? Why am I looking at him naked with like psychedelic lighting? Like what is going on?
That must be in the wrong theater.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there another Peter Boyle film out right now?
Exactly.
Yeah. And yet it's just like, wow, it's amazing. I love how it goes there. I love how it takes that guy.
It's going to go somewhere else again.
It does, but it takes him there, and he almost
kind of lulls you into thinking this might be okay. I think for a while.
Well, sometimes
that it might break him.
Sometimes in the plotting of things like this, both the old men are like, you know what? What are we fighting for?
Right.
And there's some kind of communication, and like there was that hope. That was like one of the last hopes as we went.
70s fucking
70s,
movies do
where it's
that
just like,
all
let's
the time.
talk it out. Let's have a Coke and a smile. Let's kind of figure this thing out, and maybe have some communication, man.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Bill and they both fuck up in different ways. Joe is just like meat. I want like, when can I help you again? And so forget it. He's just a pig.
But
right?
they both.
But I was gonna say, Bill is like, can't I see you again?
That's what I was gonna say.
He's getting a little. He's catching feelings.
Yeah, I know. What
But
about a weekend?
But what I'm saying is,
what about a weekend? How about a
Right, but I'm
weekend
saying,
away?
but I'm saying in an old-fashioned way, where she's like, "Man, I don't know. Like next week, I might be a lesbian.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like, when am I going to
Next
see you
week.
again?"
Yeah, exactly. And but it's amazing because it does hint at like could this soften them? Could this put their guard down? It's almost like in a weird way it becomes a coming of age movie for guys who are for one who's super old, older, and one who's 35. So it's interesting. I love it. It's amazing. It's incredible that it's in the movie. But of course, like all 70s films, hope dies fast.
Hope is strangled and held under the bathwater.
Yeah, right. Because what happens is we get the hippie
Well, the
kids.
shithead hippie guys.
They rob.
Say, hey, the coast is clear. Let's take all these drugs
And their
fucking
credit
beat
cards.
it.
And their credit cards.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and they steal the credit cards, and then the pigs are going to get involved, and it's not looking good for them. And so they run away with everything. Joe wakes up in a panic. He can't find his shit. Drugs are gone. We got to get armed, and we got to...
Right. All the groovy gel lighting is gone. It's harsh.
Yeah.
And this poor naked woman is cowering.
That's brutal.
And shaking and crying in harsh white light and not groovy gel lights.
Yeah.
As Joe is hunkered over her and shaking her and saying, "Where the fuck are they?"
Yeah.
And it's so bad. And then, of course, Bill comes in with his woman and like... that is one of the greatest renderings of a mellow harshening I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Right? And it's lingering.
Yeah.
It's punctuated.
It is. It is.
It's rough, yeah.
It's crazy.
But by her crying, like, because she's the movie's crying and freaking out.
She's so vulnerable and and naked, and her performance is good. She's like scared. It's very,
She is good.
It's very disturbing.
Very disturbing. And then, of course, they get armed and they figure out where the kids went. Somewhere upstate, I guess. And they drive out there, and of course
they're in Hudson or something.
So who knows? And they go to the house and they barge in, and it escalates very quickly. And Joe opens fire, on one of the kids, and that sort of then we see Bill, and he's like, no, and then that short circuits his homicidal tendencies.
Well, Peter Boyle's response is, "Hey man, like you've gone this far, got to go all the way, got to go clean."
Yeah,
that's what he says. Got to go clean.
Oof. Yeah,
which implies like level the village.
Yeah,
in
right,
Vietnam.
right,
You know what I mean?
right.
It's the only way they're going to get away with it.
Jason
Potentially.
Voorhees.
No witnesses, bitch.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so then they just start slaughtering everybody in sight, and it's just one of those 70s film scenes. Everyone must die, and it's crazy. And then, of course, as Bill is going on his rampage, he's shooting all the kids in sight, and then, of course, he shoots the last one. But then we find out it's Susan Sarandon.
Right. The girl running away. The girl he opens a big hole in their back is his daughter, and we go full circle.
It's a great way to depict that twist with that freeze frame on her face, and
the sound
registers and
the sound cue. There's a couple lines of dialogue that get repeated in that moment. I can't remember what it is, but it's
same here.
It works.
That is early 70s New Hollywood 101. And just as you guys are both saying, the technique, the harsh freeze frame, let it resonate, and then like of course the echoey like recall, and then this creepy sounds, and then credits roll. Like no other resolution except just complete bummer. Now the thing is, in cruder hands, other than Avildsen here, a kind of twist like that could have like not worked. Like it could have telegraphed it could have been clumsier, because it's tough to pull that off, because it's so it's almost like an EC Comics twist. Mm-hmm. Oh, actually, or like Twilight Zone. Yes, right.
Yeah,
it could have, if in blunter hands, it could have not worked. But he does everything right by the frame.
Yeah.
Like everything is tonally perfect.
Yeah, and it works. And now it's like, okay, this is just the tragedy of all of this is here, and it works. Right. And it's also like I was reading someone's review of it or something. I can't remember where I read it, but it was like someone saying like to the effect of like Joe kind of becomes the full personification of Bill's id in that moment,
Sure.
and then he's the man who exists solely to force Bill to do what he's always secretly wanted to do in the first place, is like, go, as you said, go clean, go all the way. And he's kind of the devil on his shoulder in that moment. And yeah, man, chilling.
Can you imagine some people, how about within the same movie house,
it's like-
there's cheering and then there's like people running out like gray and like shaking and crying. You know what I mean? Like the same audience, like different people. Because that's
It
a
is
very
weird.
different
What a
note
movie.
to hit for
Yeah,
different.
it does really underline just the tension in this country, like the the deep buried resentment that
Seated.
you can,
Yeah, very scary. What a fucking movie, guys. Why isn't this movie like
I
part
think, like
of
you said,
the checklist? I don't get
it's
it.
assumed it's dated, and that it's like of its time, it's not applicable today. But it is, to me, it's like Shakespearean. It's eternal storytelling.
Boom. All right. That was it. Nice
Great
job,
film,
guys. Nice
Very
job, guys.
cool. Love that film. Everyone go see it if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's classic.
again.
It's classic 1 fucking hour title. I feel like, we kind of started this, I feel like, in a way, like covering the gems, of this era.
Yeah.
And this is a fucking gem, man. It really is. So
No, it's like Deliverance level.
yeah,
This is part
Straight
of the
time.
thesis of why we
straight time
right.
level.
Yeah.
This is part of this is a title of that's based on that is a tenet of the premise of this whole stupid podcast.
Yeah, it's great.
But this is an extra dimension because Deliverance is classic,
Yeah.
But like Straight Time, it's like an overlooked gem.
It really is. It's overlooked, and it's great stuff. And it makes me want to.
it's early too in that world.
It
you know,
is.
so it's sort of influential.
It is. It is. And it was for such a big hit. I just feel like it's so weird that it didn't carry on.
Well, in this show, I'll just say one thing about how much of a hit it was. I have my Mad Magazine cover rule. And this was on the cover of
There you
one
go.
month's Mad Magazine in like 1970.
Wow.
Like it was like that's very big. Like you only the biggest films wound up on the cover of Mad.
Yeah, and we didn't touch on this either, but it's not really cheating. But the idea that there was concept art for a sequel, they were going to do Joe 2.
Well, we might be able to hook people up with a taste of it, right?
I think so. I think we might be able to. Stay
So
tuned.
stick around
Stick around.
for this new thing we call the Joeman.
It's coming. The Joeman is
Joeman.
coming. Yo, man, stick around for the Mo Man. All right. So that's Joe. Okay, great. Now let's talk about next week. We're sort of, that was Joevember, guys. That was,
All right.
One and
A
done.
rough one.
so Joevember is now
I'm
over.
glad it's done. It was fun, but I'm glad that Joevember's over.
Yeah, it is.
Did you have a good Joevember?
I did. I did.
Joevember, everybody.
It's amazing. The weather this Joevember was pretty mild. But the thing is that's interesting is we were all together just a few days ago. We were able to be together in Los Angeles, and we're going through all the Joe films that exist, and we're thinking, God, could we have done?
Like, are there 3 more movies with Joe
That
in
we
the
felt-
title?
that we-
And there are not any that we'd like to.
They're not one
cover.
fucking hour
There's
worthy.
like JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling.
There's Joe
Fuck a
versus
whole-
the volcano, though.
Yeah, which is kind of fun. But
There's
If this show is one fucking 30 minutes or
Yeah.
something, I think maybe we could do
Yeah,
that.
little fucking minutes. Yeah, guys. There's also Joe Dirt. We could have done that, of course. All right.
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
kind of tempting.
I know it is. Or there's Joe's apartment. We could have done that as well too.
That's like gun to the head. Or no, like like we'll do it for $1 million.
Yeah. Right.
Do an hour on Joe's apartment.
Exactly. So all right. So those were the Joevember thoughts, but we're moving out of Joevember.
It's over.
It's over. We did it. I'm happy. Now next week, just mild tradition here on the show, as we're into our 4th goddamn year, which is pretty crazy. But we for Thanksgiving, because next week is Thanksgiving. When we do get around to Thanksgiving, we like to pick films that are what kind of comforty, good feeling. Sometimes we've picked films that are we've thought are overstuffed, you know, in the sense of, you know, the indulgence of Thanksgiving. But this year we're going to do what, Tom? I mean, how would you just characterize your Thanksgiving pick here?
Well, I mean, I was recommending it because somehow, basically, Apple, you know, Apple Inc. has sort of pinpointed Thanksgiving. Yeah, baby. Apple, whatever they're called now, you know, Apple Company. You know,
Yeah.
the other Apple, the Beatles Apple.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
It's confusing.
Okay.
I don't know what they're called.
Apple
anymore.
Records, Apple
Yeah,
Music?
that corporation.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I noticed just the other day was like, for some reason, Thanksgiving has become like a Beatles like tentpole contemporary release. And we're all kind of relying on it. There's like Get Back, but there was also Let It Be, right?
Yeah.
And then there was the Beatles single. God, what was that called last year? Not Real Love, but
I can't remember
well,
I
the
can't
one
remember.
that, you know, the one that got reworked, John's tape,
vocal,
Right.
yeah,
and then Paul and Ringo, and then even some
God,
George
now there's
guitar.
great. Now there's a Beatles song I don't know the name to. You know, what I mean? Like,
Well, anyway,
I hate
that came out in November. I remember that.
Right.
And then now. So the thing is now, the day after Thanksgiving is going to be this thing. It looks very cool. It's Beatles 64,
That's
and
right.
it's executive produced by Martin Scorsese, and it looks really cool. It's all this archival footage and a lot that's been unseen.
Now and then. by
Now
the
and
way.
then was the
Now
name
and
of the
then
song.
was the song, right? And so anyway, like I just was thinking, like I don't mind this. I kind of like hope there's another one next year, whatever the hell it
Yeah.
is, like a restoration of Yellow Submarine. So anyway, to the point, I was thinking, let's just fucking Beatles out. Let's just like do what everybody's doing, like have like Thanksgiving Beatles is like a thing. You know?
It is.
Like
It
maybe
is.
little kids years from now are like, oh, that's that Thanksgiving band.
Yeah, totally. So
I'm serious, you know.
So let's this is gonna be great. So we're gonna do our first Beatles film, right?
Yeah,
Although
we like the Beatles here.
Yeah,
all of us.
absolutely.
In our own way.
Absolutely. We flirted around with the idea a lot of doing Let It Be. I know we talked about before doing, but now the one we've picked, Tom, which one should we go with for Thanksgiving here?
We were thinking of doing Help! Exclamation point. Because the way, man. So we're gonna do Help next week for Beatles Giving, and the way I see it is there's something really cool about the 1-2 punch of Richard Lester's films, Hard Day's Night, black and white, shot in 1963, and it's still kind of like Camelot Kennedy era. It's still black and white 60s. Let's just put it that way. It's still, you know, it's still black and white 60s. The terms and the totems of the early 60s are distinct from just a few years later, 64 into 65.
Yep.
And by the time you get to 65, Help is in full color. It's jazzier. It's more informed by indirectly and directly by drugs and pot, and it's kind of more
It's a mod
screwed up.
film.
And it's a movie that influenced, you know, the Monkees show is certainly that, but
Yeah.
also like Monty Python,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
And so it's a very influential film and really a signifier that when you see Help, that movie wouldn't have happened in 63. And it would have been unimaginable in 1957, you know, like what it is and, you know, and how it works. It's kind of like, you know, almost like LSD Marx Brothers kind of thing.
Yeah.
It is like funnier than Hard Day's Night, and a bit more fantastical in a way, and a lot more jokes, a lot more like
Well, there's a lot of absurdity, crazy cutting, and
absurd jokes.
Again, I like it as much because it's a cool Richard Lester film, who's an interesting filmmaker, and then also Beatles film, of course, and then all the great Beatles songs. So I thought we'd do that and kind of just take a load off and talk about how fun and cool the Beatles are. And we know, again, we're all big fans, and so I thought that's how
Let's do it. So next week, everybody, is going to be 1 fucking hour on Help for Thanksgiving. And then I'll just give a little deep tease. The episode after that, first week of December, we have a guest I've been looking forward to having on the show for a very long time.
Yeah.
Very good friend of all of ours. And he's picked quite the film.
It's Jake Paul, everybody. Yeah. Jake Paul's coming by.
Yeah, exactly. So Jake Paul's pick stay tuned for what that's going to be.
Pink Floyd, The Wall.
Yeah. Or training day. It's totally training day.
Totally.
Yeah. No, that's not what's happening.
No, that's actually not happening.
Not what's happening.
I am making a joke.
Yeah, totally. But I'm very excited about what this is going to be, and it's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy hour. I'm very excited. So, all right. So,
Same.
and then just before we get out of here, make sure also to check out the One Fucking Hour Patreon. Everybody, patreon.com/one fucking hour. Best way to support the show, get early access to the apps. We're overdue for a bonus app. We need to get into the bonus soon.
We'll figure that out.
Yeah, it's also helpful to know what you guys like as far as the bonus apps. Like, if do you like when we do listy kind of things, or just rando subjects, not movie related subjects? Like, what do you guys like? Let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
So
that'd be cool to hear, get some feedback. And in 2025, we got some fun stuff in store.
Yep.
We got some. We're talking some interesting curveball ideas, some new series.
New series. Yep. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming up. So stick around for the ride. But of course, we never can leave you without your moment of Zen. And
laugh every time.
It is, but this is the Joeman. This is the Joeman of Zen.
This is the Joeman variant.
Joeman variant. Oh my God! All right, everybody. Well, we will see you very soon, I'm sure. And take care for now. And take care. See you later. Bye bye.
Peace and love.
Bye.
Hey, Joe.
In 1969, Joe told the world what he thought about the youth movement.
You're getting away with murder. Sex, drugs, pissing on America, fucking up the music.
Then Joe became involved in it.
He just beat the world speed record.
Later that same year, Joe was convicted for the killing of 8 youths in upstate New York.
There's only one way out now. Clean. That means everybody.
Now, in 1985, Joe has been released from prison. The times have changed, but the man hasn't. Citizen Joe, he's back.
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.
That was wicked, man.